The Hoya Forest in Romania is not your ordinary woodland. Known as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, it is a place where reality bends and the unexplained thrives. This dense, shadowy forest is a living nightmare, where strange phenomena have plagued the land for decades. The locals speak in hushed tones about the shepherd who, along with his 200 sheep, disappeared without a trace, never to be seen again. And though such occurrences are the stuff of ghost stories, the forest's sinister reputation is grounded in the very real terror that lingers within its darkened trees. Yet, Romania is not the only place where such chilling mysteries exist. Across the sea, in the wilds of Scotland, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse stands as an eerie monument to a baffling and terrifying disappearance. In December of 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur, vanished without a single trace. No one knows what happened to them. The lighthouse was found abandoned, the lights out, and all signs of life vanished. Their fate remains one of the most perplexing maritime mysteries in history, inspiring endless theories, but no definitive answers. The legend of their disappearance lingers, haunting the shores to this day. Then, in the heart of Massachusetts, there is another place drenched in darkness, the Lizzie Borden house, where the brutal axe murders of Andrew and Abby Borden in 1892 shocked the nation. Today, it stands as a bed and breakfast, drawing the curious and the brave who come seeking a glimpse into its gruesome past. But the house is far from peaceful. Guests and staff alike report hearing strange footsteps, feeling cold drafts in rooms that should be warm, and sometimes even glimpsing shadowy figures moving in the corners of their eyes. The house is alive with whispers of its tragic history, each creak of the floorboards telling a tale of bloodshed and grief. It's a place that refuses to let go of its past. Traveling west, beneath the bustling streets of Portland, Oregon, lies a dark and twisted secret, the Shanghai Tunnels. These underground passages, built in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, were used for a horrifying purpose, kidnapping unsuspecting individuals and forcing them into servitude on ships bound for distant shores. While some dismiss the tales as overblown, the tunnels' suffocating claustrophobic air and the chilling stories of lost souls still capture the imaginations of those who venture into their depths. The tunnels are a silent testament to a darker chapter in history, one where fear and mystery intertwine, drawing a haunting veil over the city. Each of these locations, whether the haunted forest of Hoya, the abandoned lighthouse on the Flannan Isles, the blood-stained halls of the Lizzie Borden house, or the suffocating tunnels of Portland, stands as a reminder that some places are forever bound by the shadows of their past. They are silent witnesses to events that defy explanation, holding secrets that we may never fully understand. The veil between the known and the unknowable remains thin in these places, beckoning those who dare to uncover what lies beneath the surface of history. The stories of these haunted places live on, forever etched into the landscape of our collective imagination. They remind us that some mysteries are never meant to be solved, and perhaps that is what makes them all the more terrifying. The rain poured relentlessly, hammering against the windshield as the car sped down the empty highway. The road stretched endlessly, its dark surface glistening under the downpour. The headlights barely cut through the mist, revealing only a blurry outline of the asphalt ahead. Inside the car, a lone traveler squinted through the thick rain, fatigue settling deep into his bones. His fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to empty, and the weight of his exhaustion made every mile feel heavier. Then, through the haze, he saw it, a flickering sign glowing weakly in the storm. Pine Hollow Motel, vacancy. His heart lifted with the prospect of a place to rest. He turned on his signal, the tires splashing loudly through the puddles as he pulled into the nearly deserted parking lot. A single sedan sat near the entrance, its headlights dimmed. With a sigh of relief, the traveler parked and killed the engine. The rain beat harder against the roof of his car, almost as if the storm itself was trying to drown out the world beyond. As he stepped out into the downpour, the cold rain soaked through his clothes in an instant. He hurried inside, water dripping from his coat and shoes onto the worn carpet of the front lobby. The air inside was thick with the scent of stale coffee and damp wood. Behind the counter, a tired-looking clerk sat hunched over a dog-eared newspaper, not bothering to look up as the traveler approached. "Need a room?" The clerk's voice was hoarse, tired, its rasp a mix of age and exhaustion. "Yeah, just for the night," the traveler replied, rubbing his hands together in a futile attempt to warm them. The clerk slid a guest book across the counter without a word. As the traveler picked up the pen, the clerk suddenly cleared his throat, his voice dropping to a quiet, serious tone. "One thing," he said, finally meeting the traveler's gaze. His pale eyes seemed to see through the man, not at him. "If you see a man standing in the rain, don't acknowledge him. Don't speak to him. Don't even look too long." The traveler chuckled nervously, dismissing it as some kind of strange, small-town superstition. But the clerk's unblinking stare held steady, not a flicker of humor in his expression. "I'm serious," the clerk insisted, his voice barely a whisper now. "Just don't." Confused but intrigued, the traveler hesitated for a moment, then signed his name in the guest book. The clerk handed him an old rusted key with the number 6 stamped on it. "Room 6, end of the hall," he muttered, then turned his attention back to his newspaper. The traveler gave a brief nod and made his way down the narrow hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots, the sound echoing eerily in the dim-lit corridor. The door to room 6 was unlocked, the knob cold to the touch. Inside, the room was unremarkable. Peel-and wallpaper, a flickering lamp, and the faint smell of mildew. But at least it was dry. He dropped his bag onto the bed, the springs creaking under the weight, and made his way to the window to peer out into the storm. Through the rain-smeared glass, the world beyond appeared distorted, as if reality itself was being warped by the relentless downpour. The neon sign of the motel glowed faintly, its light struggling to break through the storm's fury. But then his eyes froze. In the parking lot, standing motionless in the downpour, was a figure. No umbrella, no movement, just standing there, staring at the motel. The traveler felt a chill creep up his spine. It was probably just another guest, he reasoned, maybe some drifter. Nothing to worry about. He turned away, trying to shake the unease gnawing at him, and switched on the TV. The static-filled screen flickered to life, filling the room with an eerie hum. The voices on the screen droned on, their words meaningless to him, as the exhaustion from his long drive began to weigh him down. Before long, his eyelids grew heavy, and he drifted into a light, uneasy sleep. Suddenly, a faint tap, tap, tap echoed through the room. The sound sliced through the silence like a knife. The traveler's eyes shot open. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the television, its blue light flickering erratically. The tap, tap, tap came again, closer this time. His heart pounded as he turned his head slowly, his breath catching in his throat. The curtain, which had been firmly drawn just moments ago, was now slightly parted. Behind the rain-streaked glass, the figure was there again, but this time it was closer, much closer. The man stood motionless, his head tilted slightly to the side, as if listening for something just beyond the threshold of hearing. The traveler's blood ran cold, the clerk's warning echoing in his mind. If you see a man standing in the rain, don't acknowledge him. The traveler's fingers tightened around the blanket. He told himself that if he just ignored it, it would go away. Maybe it was nothing. But then the lamp above his head flickered once more. The tap, tap, tap came again, louder now. Something inside him snapped. He couldn't resist. He turned just slightly to glance back at the window to confirm that he wasn't imagining it. In that instant, the figure was no longer outside. It was inside, standing at the foot of his bed, water dripping from its sodden clothes, pooling onto the floor. The TV cut to static, the sharp buzz filling the room like a swarm of angry bees. The storm outside intensified, the rain hammering against the windows with deafening force. The traveler recoiled in terror, his heart thundering in his chest. The air in the room was thick, charged with an oppressive energy. The figure took a slow step forward, the sound of water dripping onto the carpet a sickening rhythm. Another step, then another. The traveler opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His voice caught in his throat, swallowed by the thick, suffocating darkness that seemed to descend upon him. Panic surged through him, but his limbs refused to move. His mind screamed, but his body betrayed him. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went black. The traveler awoke with a start. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting warm beams across the room. The rain had stopped. The air was still. The room was dry, silent. Everything was just as it should be. But something was off. The traveler sat up, gasping for breath, his heart still pounding in his chest. It had to have been a nightmare, a product of exhaustion. He had fallen asleep, lost in a strange, dark dream. He stumbled out of bed, his legs shaky as he tried to piece together what had happened. The carpet was dry. The TV was off. Everything seemed normal, but the dread in his chest wouldn't fade. Still shaken, he hurried to the front desk. The same clerk was there, sipping coffee as if nothing had happened. The traveler leaned over the counter, his voice trembling as he spoke. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "The man in the rain, the one in my room?" The clerk simply sighed and rubbed his temple, his expression weary. "You saw him." It wasn't a question. "He was in my room, right there." The traveler stammered, his panic rising. The clerk set his coffee down and slid the guest book across the counter. He motioned for the traveler to look at it. "Check your name," he said, his voice low. Confused, the traveler leaned in and looked at the page. His name was there, clear as day. But what sent a cold shiver down his spine was the date. It wasn't the previous night. His name was written under today's date, but not as a new guest. It had already been signed in, years ago. A cold sweat broke out across the traveler's skin. "You've been here before." His breath caught in his throat. The image It had happened before, and before that, and before that. The man in the rain had been waiting for him to return. And now the cycle was starting again. The wind howled outside, its mournful wail cutting through the stillness of the motel. The traveler's heart thudded heavily in his chest as he stood there, staring at the guest book in front of him. The faint glow of the dim overhead lights seemed to mock his growing dread. His eyes locked onto one name, his name, written in faded ink, as though it had been there for years. It was the date of his checkout, but it was today. His pulse quickened, his breath shallow and erratic. How could this be? The shock was palpable, but the more he tried to grasp reality, the more it slipped through his fingers. The clerk, sitting across the counter in an almost detached state, didn't even acknowledge his distress. His gaze remained fixed on a newspaper, the pages crinkling under his indifferent hands. The traveler's voice faltered as he stammered, I don't understand. This has to be a mistake." His fingers gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. Still the clerk didn't respond. Frustration surged through the traveler, pulling him toward the edge of a breakdown. "Tell me this is a mistake," he demanded, his voice cracking. But the clerk remained eerily silent. His eyes didn't leave this paper, as if the world had stopped, as if the traveler didn't exist in that moment. Fear settled deep in the traveler's bones. His thoughts scrambled. He backed away slowly, his eyes still locked on the guest book. His mind screamed at him to leave, but his body felt rooted to the spot. The storm outside raged louder, the wind howling and the rain smacking against the windows like an unstoppable force. And then, in the reflection of the glass doors, he saw it. The figure standing in the parking lot, watching, waiting. Panic surged, flooding his veins. His legs moved without his consent, urging him toward the exit. He needed to get out of there. He needed to run. His car, his room, his keys. He dashed through the lobby, the door swinging open with a harsh bang. The storm's cold gusts biting at his face as he rushed back to room 6. His feet stumbled against the slick carpet, his hands fumbling with the key. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. With a violent twist of the lock, the door creaked open, and then he froze. Inside, the room was pristine, as if no one had stayed there. The bed was made, the TV off, and the carpet was dry. There was no sign of his presence. The room had been untouched, but something was wrong. The air was thick with an oppressive, unseen presence. Something wasn't right. A wet footprint, just inside the doorway. He turned, his breath catching as a faint sound echoed from the bathroom. A tap. Another tap. His eyes followed the noise, slowly shifting toward the bathroom door, which was ajar, the faintest sliver of darkness spilling out from within. The tap came again. A soft, deliberate sound, like something or someone shifting just beyond the doorframe. He reached out with a trembling hand, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. His body screamed at him to stop, to run, but his legs betrayed him. He had to know. Then the lights flickered.
A deafening crack of thunder shook the walls, rattling the room. The TV came to life, its screen a mass of static that roared through the room like 1,000 whispers. The bathroom door slammed open. The room plunged into darkness. And then a whisper, right behind him. "You shouldn't have looked." The words slithered into his ears like a cold breath. Before he could process them, he turned and ran. His feet pounded against the hallway carpet. the sound of the storm outside mingling with the frantic rhythm of his heartbeat. The hallway lights flickered, dying one by one, swallowed by the blackness as the motel seemed to close in around him. The exit was so close, yet it felt miles away. He reached the lobby, but when he stepped inside, it was empty. The clerk was gone. The guest book was nowhere to be found. It was as if nothing had ever existed in this place. Desperation clawed at him. He rushed outside, the wind whipping around him, the air biting cold as the storm raged on. His car, his escape. He fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking uncontrollably. When he finally opened the door and slid into the driver's seat, something caught his breath. The seat was wet, soaking, as though someone had been sitting there, waiting. His heart skipped a beat as a chill brushed against his neck. He turned. The figure was there, sitting in the passenger seat dripping, and it was smiling. The door slammed shut. The sound was deafening. A scream escaped the traveler's throat, but it was swallowed by the silence that followed. And then, darkness. The sunlight was soft as it filtered through the blinds. The storm had vanished, leaving only the quiet hum of morning. The traveler's eyes snapped open. He was standing in the lobby again. The clerk was there, holding out a rusted key. "Room 6, the clerk said, his voice calm, unwavering. End of the hall. The traveler's throat tightened. His mind felt sluggish, disconnected, as though the weight of some unknown force was pressing down on him. His legs moved on their own accord, carrying him toward the hallway. His thoughts blurred. You've been here before. The door to room 6 was already open, waiting for him. And outside in the distance, the rain had started again. And there, standing, was the figure, watching, waiting, for him to return. And he would, forever. The traveler stood frozen at the front desk, staring at the rusted key the clerk was holding out to him. It was as if the world had slowed around him. The words, "Room 6, end of the hall," came out of the clerk's mouth in a flat, emotionless tone. But the traveler felt a strange heaviness in his chest, a sensation that something was terribly wrong. He reached out to take the key, but something deep inside him screamed, "Don't take it. Don't go back there." His fingers twitched involuntarily, as though controlled by some invisible force, and before he knew it, his hand closed around the cold metal. "Good night," the clerk murmured, his pale eyes never leaving the traveler's face. Without a word, the traveler turned away from the counter and stepped toward the hallway. The carpet beneath his feet felt oddly familiar, like he had walked this very path countless times before. The wallpaper, yellowed and peeling at the edges, seemed to breathe in the dim light. Each step felt like an echo of something lost, something he couldn't fully remember. As he reached the end of the hall, the door to room 6 stood ajar, inviting him in. The dim light from the room flickered, casting long shadows that stretched toward him like fingers. He hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The air was thick with the smell of dampness and decay. His duffel bag lay on the bed, but he hadn't brought it in with him. It shouldn't have been there. He swallowed hard, his fingers brushing against the bag. It was half open, as if it had been waiting for him. His hand moved against his will, pulling the zipper down. Inside, neatly folded, was a set of clothes, his clothes. A cold shiver ran down his spine as he found his toothbrush tucked inside alongside a motel receipt, dated 3 years ago. He stumbled back, his mind swimming, trying to make sense of the impossible. His breath was coming in shallow gasps now. He opened the nightstand drawer and found an old wallet. He opened it, and his own ID stared back at him. His heart stuttered as he saw the checkout date listed as today. But the issue date, 3 years ago. Panic began to overtake him. He knocked over the lamp, its flickering bulb buzzing before dying, plunging the room into darkness. And then, tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the window. His body froze. Slowly, his head turned. There, outside in the pouring rain, a dark figure stood.
The curtain was pulled aside, and there was no mistaking it. The figure was watching him, waiting. Water dripped from its outline, pooling beneath the window. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The words of the clerk echoed in his mind. Don't acknowledge him. Don't look too long. But before he could stop himself, his eyes locked with the figure's. Then it happened. The figure wasn't outside anymore. It was in the room, right in front of him. It had crossed the threshold, and now it was standing there, dripping water onto the floor. His heart raced, and instinct kicked in. He turned and ran, slamming the door behind him. The hallway stretched endlessly, longer than it should have been. The doors on either side blurred into an unbroken line. He had to get out. He had to escape. But no matter how fast he ran, the hallway seemed to stretch farther and farther. Each door he tried was locked. Panic surged through him. "Help me," he screamed, his voice hoarse. "Someone!" His foot collided with his duffel bag, lying in the middle of the hall as if it had been placed there just for him. He glanced back. The lobby, the front desk, the guest book, everything was suddenly there as if nothing had changed. The clerk, calm and unbothered, was at the counter. "Please," the traveler gasped, his hand slamming down on the counter. "I don't belong here." The clerk only nodded slightly, his eyes distant. "You checked in," he said, sliding the guest book toward him. "And no one leaves without checking out." The traveler's blood ran cold as he saw his name in the book. Fresh ink. The checkout date read, tomorrow. He staggered backward, shaking his head in disbelief. Number. No. He couldn't understand it. The clerk's expression didn't change. "You've been here before," he said, his voice slow, almost pitying. "I haven't," the traveler snapped, his voice cracking. The clerk tilted his head. "Haven't you?" The words struck the traveler like a blow to the chest. Suddenly, memories flooded his mind, rushing in like a tidal wave. Rain, the neon motel sign, the tapping at the window, the man in the rain. He gasped for breath, his knees giving way, his mind shattered under the weight of an understanding he couldn't process. It wasn't just a nightmare. It wasn't just a bad memory. It was a loop, an endless cycle that he couldn't escape. "What is this place?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The clerk gave a simple answer. A stop, a place between. Between what? The traveler's pulse raced as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The clerk didn't answer. Instead, he turned the guest book to the last page. The traveler's eyes widened as he saw a long list of names, dozens, no, hundreds, each one with a checkout date. But every single one of those dates was the same. Tomorrow. The traveler's hands trembled as he backed away from the counter. His heart was pounding in his chest. He turned around, his breath catching in his throat. Room 6 was waiting for him, the door slightly ajar. He reached the end of the hall and saw it again. The empty lobby, the desk, the guest book. Everything was gone. The clerk was gone, and the building itself seemed to fade around him. The walls, the carpet. They didn't feel real anymore. A shadow fell over him, cold and wet. He didn't need to turn to know it was there. The figure was standing inches behind him, watching, waiting for him to return. The sound of thunder split the air, and everything went black. When the traveler opened his eyes, it was as if nothing had changed. He was standing at the front desk again, and the rusted key was still there in the clerk's hand. The rain began outside just as it always had, and the figure, he was still there, standing in the distance, watching, waiting, and no matter how hard the traveler tried to escape, it would never be enough. The cycle would continue. The man in the rain would always be there, waiting for him to return. The traveler stood motionless at the front desk, the rusted key cold and solid in his hand. The weight of it, he could feel it deep in his bones. This wasn't the first time. He knew somehow it wouldn't be the last. His mind screamed at him, urging him to break the cycle, to fight, to run. But his feet moved forward anyway, down the hall, toward room 6. The air was thick, heavy with something ancient, something wrong. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the lights above flickered, buzzing faintly before they stabilized. His breath came ragged, each inhale a struggle. The key, gripped so tightly that his knuckles turned white, felt like it was burning through his skin. He would not open that door. The traveler spun around, determined to turn back. But as his eyes scanned the hallway, the front desk was gone. The exit was gone. Only doors remained, stretching on and on in either direction, identical, unmarked, endless. And then he saw them. Others. Figures standing in the dark spaces between the doors, silent, motionless, watching him, dripping. The traveler's heart lurched, his blood turning cold. His pulse roared in his ears, nearly drowning out the soft whispering that filled the space. It was faint at first, barely noticeable, until it grew louder. Layered voices, overlapping, weaving through the air like the fabric of a nightmare. He turned his head slowly, and there, a face, inches from his, gray, hollow, eyes empty, lips moving soundlessly. The world seemed to crack open with a deafening thunderclap. The lights above flickered out, plunging the hallway into darkness. The whispering grew louder, more frantic, more urgent, and then everything vanished. The others. When the traveler opened his eyes again, it wasn't the same place. Darkness surrounded him, not just the absence of light, but a deep, oppressive darkness, something that had weight, something with teeth. The whispering pressed in on him, growing louder, more insistent. Shadows flickered around him, twisted and warped like distorted reflections in a shattered mirror. Figures emerged from the darkness, dozens, hundreds, people who had stayed at the Pine Hollow Motel, people who had checked in and never checked out. Their faces flickered between human and something else entirely. Their eyes were black voids, their mouths moving in silent whispers that sent chills down his spine. And then, from the midst of the mass, a single voice rose above the others. "We're still here." The traveler staggered backward, his breath coming in short, gasping bursts. The whispering filled his skull, seeping into his bones, threatening to crack him open. He clutched his head, trying to block it out, but the words still tore through his mind. "No, no!" he screamed, his voice an echo in the vast, oppressive nothingness. But his cry was swallowed by the darkness. Then, "You were always going to come back." The traveler froze, his throat tightened. That voice, it was his. A horrifying truth. He turned, desperate to escape the voice, but there was nowhere to go. And then he saw it. Himself. Standing there, smiling, but the reflection wasn't his. The figure before him was drenched, water pooling at his feet, skin gray, wrinkled, as if soaked in something for years. His eyes weren't his own. They were hollow, empty. Sound. The light snapped back on with a sudden, disorienting rush of sound. Rain pounds against glass, filling the space with a deafening roar. The traveler was back in room 6, but something was wrong. The mirror above the dresser no longer reflected his own image. It showed the man in the rain. And the figure smiled. The whispering escalated into a cacophony of sound. The walls trembled, and the television blared static, growing louder by the second. The rain outside seemed to press in on him, deafening. And then the floor collapsed beneath him. Tomorrow never comes. He fell through the floor, through the motel, through time. The world shifted, spun out of control. The traveler felt as though he were fallen forever, his body caught in an endless descent. The ground was gone. The walls were gone. The cycle was all that remained. Suddenly, he opened his eyes again. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly in the distance, the soft sound of morning birdsong drifting into his awareness. He was standing at the front desk. The clerk was holding out the rusted key. "Room 6, the clerk said in that same detached tone. "End of the hall." The traveler's chest tightened. He couldn't breathe. His throat felt dry, tight. His hands trembled as they reached out to take the key. I don't want to go back," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The clerk smiled, but it wasn't kind. It was the smile of someone who had seen this moment 1,000 times before. "You never left." The traveler's stomach twisted. His mind screamed against the truth. But as his eyes dropped to the guest book, he saw it. The names written in slanted handwriting, dozens of them, hundreds. And there, in the middle of the page, his name. The checkout date read, "Tomorrow." But something else caught his eye. There were pages and pages of his name, each one written in the same slanted, familiar handwriting, each with a different checkout date. And each date led back to the same lie. Tomorrow. The traveler staggered backward, his world spinning out of control. The door to room 6 swung open on its own, as though inviting him back inside. The traveler closed his eyes. He could already hear it, the whispering, the static, the soft at the window. He knew what came next. He had always known, because it had already happened. And it would happen again, and again, and again, for eternity.